I'm Jade, and in this episode we're going to be looking at songs, poems and the mysteries of Paisley. This episode features historical events and snapshots of the Sma Shot Cottages for some of the images I have taken. Also featuring in this episode are songs and poems collected by the poet Leonard and also Helen Kyle, who did a lot of fantastic work to collect and reclaim the customs and traditions of Paisley.
What do these photos say about?
Well, I guess kind of we took like a mix of photographs. So like, that was like when we were on the tour. He was like kind of near up that steep hill by the antique shop. He was just kind of talking about the church that was on the top of that hill, and how Paisley had quite a lot of churches because of like the large community that came in, and to the point it ended up being split because you had like your Gaelic churches and then like your other churches, and then when the events happened where the churches split from like being fully like religious only, you then had to make other versions of those churches in Paisley as well to fit those communities.
When girls come down from the Highlands and Islands, what they did was they had a accommodation for them to stay in.
So they'd come for periods of time to work.
And the accommodation was provided for them. So the court's generosity in particular was for Paisley in general. They gave us the first public park, the Fountain Gardens. They gave us the museum and library. They paid for the restoration of the abbey. They put a hospital in the Glen for Braes for tuberculosis. And they built churches in Paisley, the Wall Youth Church. Their generosity went beyond.
So this is a very nice photo.
So it's like a photograph of one of the looms inside the Sma Shot Cottage that still works. And there is a guy who like works or is retired from the Paisley Museum who does know how to use it still. So he comes in apparently and just whenever he wants and just uses it to make his own stuff. And the cottage at the moment are trying to find another like weaver to try get them in full time to work on it.
Pinnacle, pornicle, around the tunnet's up. Pinnacle, pornicle, music o' the loom. Pinnacle, pornicle, around the tunnet's up. Pinnacle, pornicle, music o' the loom.
That's like I can't remember her name, but she was like doing like this spinning in the wool and kind of like talking about like, how that would work. You'd have someone sitting there kind of like spinning your wool to make the thread for the weavers to then use. And then you had your bell, and that was in the courtyard, but it was used in the mills originally. Then it got donated to a church, and when the church was getting demolished, the cottage took the bell, but the actually dingy bit inside it's missing, so we could still ring it by hitting it with a hammer.
Feel free to all have a go.
That was really quite fun.
I'll record that. Oh, does it? You get a different.
By the way, that they said the significance of that drum. That drum is called the what do they call it? South end of Paisley, the Charleston. Or they come from Glasgow, Charleston, but Charleston of your Paisley. We don't say bobbins, we say bobbins. We don't go listen to a band, we go listen to a bone. But the significance behind that drum is that's a Charleston drum.
Also by the fact there was like a Scottish like weaver or something like who stole the drum like on the Battle of Waterloo, and that's
amazing.
And the recreation of that drum's still in Paisley, I think, in the museum.
Yeah,
and they've remade a model of it, 100% of it that's used in the Sma Shot Parade.
It sounds very Paisley.
It
like, the bit in the Weaving Summer said about the stolen trolley. That's what it is.
We just stole a drum from
when that drum was beat. What happened was the courts had decided they weren't going to pay the weavers for the Sma Shot. and the weavers took them on. When that drum was beat, the weavers all down tools and gathered together, and the Paisley weavers are said to be the first trade union movement in Scotland. That's the significance behind that. And when that drum was beat, the weavers down tools and they all got together and they took the bosses on, and eventually they won their case, and they got...
They were actually, while they were weaving, they were like, they had like an apprentice, and they would be like reading from the Bible while the people worked and stuff to kind, because that'd be the start of their education apparently and stuff.
What was quite interesting about Radical Renfrew was that it was, you sort of learned that along with the mill heritage, there were, as I think Jade mentioned earlier on, there was a lot of rebellions and there was a lot of kind of uprisings, and one of you was saying something about Sma Shot Day and how they didn't actually know the kind of radical origins of it.
I kind of knew like the basic origins of it, of like how it was started based on like wanting payment for like the invisible thread, the 8th thread really. From what I could like read and understand, it was just, I think it was like a build up of pressure of like not being paid enough for like this one bit of thread, that without it all their work would basically not exist because they'll just unravel. But the higher ups and people were just not wanting to pay for it because it's not visible, so why should I pay for this invisible thread? It must not exist. And then like, yeah, back then as well, you had like the guy would go around like lighting all your like gas lamps and stuff. He'd also have the job of going up to the windows and chapping on them with like his stick to wake you up as well.
Yeah, I had a conversation about that with someone asking like, how did people like back then wake up with alarm clocks? One was like, someone used to go around and chat the windows up, but how would they wake up?
I think you probably also had ones that just didn't go to sleep, maybe.
Yeah, I think
they do the morning, night and stuff.
Could have been that as well.
Yeah.
Now, next family along came the Clarke family. Now the Clarke family, James Clarke was a farmer, and he was out in Dyke Bar. He was the father of 14 children. Not all survived, only 6 survived when he died. So he left a wife and 6 children who were too young to farm the land. So they came into Paisley, and 2 of the sons, James and John preferred to be called Patrick for some reason, and I don't know why. So they were what they called weavers' furnishers, or courts in Paisley. They were the bosses. That goes back to a weaving story, which I can tell you if you want to hear about that. But the reason they were called courts in Paisley is a court floats. And they floated wherever they had to float to get the weaver whatever he needed. The weaver's furniture was the middleman. At one point it was the middleman.
It's the first Saturday of every July, and it's been that way since it started really, which was like back in the 1856, went to the mid-70s, stopped, and then restarted in like 1886 by like Danny Kyle.
1986.
Like 1986, 85 kind of deal.
Yeah. Years and years later, I married a guy called Danny Kyle, and it was very interesting. In Paisley, you met at Burton's and you walked to the ice rink, and then you walked back, and on that travel, you got to meet people who stopped and talked and said, hi, da 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 da. And so I met Danny Kyle that way outside Burton's, and he was the first man who made me laugh. So obviously I fell in love, and years later we actually set up folk song clubs, and that was a really, really interesting time because the folk song clubs were actually influenced by the political folk singing of Pete Seeger and Peggy Seeger, and from that, years later, Danny started to look at the history of Sma Shot Day in relation to, because Sma Shot Day had been given a small house to start developing that, and Danny actually was able to research, the history of Sma Shot Day and bring it back as a sort of piece. And during that period, he would write songs about people's conversations, about songs about the mill, songs about lullabies, you know, the shipbuilding, because he had been an engineer in the shipbuilding community. And then, so I'm thinking, working class women marrying an engineer? Oh God, I'm going up in the world. And then he became a folk singer.
The weaver's mind is on his work, his hands they deftly fly. Peace and rest his body shirks until his task is by. And he hums to the music o' the loom. As the clock takes shape, it brightens up the room.
It also, like, the parade starts in Brodie Park, which apparently is like where there is a stone or something there, which apparently back in the first like riots and that was like where some people would stand up and kind of get the crowd riled up on.
Wow.
That's in Brodie Park, and then from there the parade would just continue up and stop round about the town hall in the council like area.
Is that still there?
I think so, yeah.
When I was a drawboy, in the village of Charleston, near Paisley town, I there was brought up many years now gone round, when the plaids were in vogue and the weaving was thrang, and the swing o' the lay was I heard wi' a bang, the click o' the shuttle and the whir o' the wheel, the tramp o' the treadles and the swish o' the deal, the shout to draw it up, or the notes o' a sang, were all heard around as ye step it alang, when I was a drawboy. Some good folk were in it, and that is quite true. Some beyond folk were in it, but o' them mighty few. They all had a knack both to speak and discuss, 'bout religion and politics they made a big fuss. At Union Street corner what disputes took place, till some would turn red and some white in the face. I've thought action sign, and it isn't a joke, that they were funny bodies, the Charleston folk, when I was a drawboy. On Mondays and they days the looms made nae din, for the lay was at rest with a hard book and pin. They were all their ain meisters, they had nae a boss. Some played at bullets, some played pitch and toss. Nae police to fash them or roar in their lugs. Some had great cock battles and some fought their dugs. And whiles at the Inuit, the truth for to tell, the principals aft had a battle themselves when I was a drawboy. What noise and running, and oh what dispute, when a meeting was called and the drum was sent out. When a causey-side magnate with prices reduce, there was running and stumping and muckle abuse, and his effigy hung up tween twa mid-room lums, wi' his belly filled fu o' tar ravelin and thrums. What shots they fired until late in the night, and then it illumined the hale street wi' its licht, when I was a drawboy. But that has all gone now for mony a year, and the click o' the shuttle you'd scarcely now hear. The tale and the simple, the lashes and awe, with the deal and the drawboy, he passed clean awa. And the place now looks better than what it did then, and may it be better in women and men, and healthier and cleaner and happier too, than when the first lash and first simple I drew, when I was a drawboy. So that was the poem When I Was a Drawboy, written by Duncan McFarlane McNeil. He was born in Renfrew in 1830, and the poem was published in his collection of poems called The Drunkard Reformed, or When I Wandered Round the Moor, and other poems and songs, which was published in 1860. So that's that. Hail to thee, Duncan McFarlane McNeil.